All right, so this is a Google document that I have shared with you in Google Classroom. It is called, in Google Classroom, Lesson 4, Investigating How Water Moves Around the UAE. So since you couldn't be here to do the investigations in class, I am setting them up for you to do via video. So before you get started, you can see that each link links down to a separate section. Each of them goes to a different experiment. The first thing you do before you get started is you need to do this introduction and set a purpose for the investigations. Why are we doing these investigations? If you're struggling with how to answer that, I would suggest looking at the description of the task. You need to set this purpose because this is something that all scientists do before they do an investigation. They have a question that's their purpose, or they set, a statement of purpose. What are they trying to find out? All right, this is station 1, the stream table. And in this station, you're investigating runoff, which is water that runs off the land. So as you can see, it's all set up. Here's some land. It's set up on a slope. So it's like a hill, and our water is gonna come out of here. And so if you look at the table, in the investigation document, that you can see that you're gonna look at first a quarter cup, a half a cup, and a whole cup, and 3/4 of a cup to see what happens. And as you can see, water is running down here, okay, down this hill, and you can see a whole bunch of this sand has been carried downhill by the water. Now we're gonna try half of a cup. And again, you can see even more water is running down. It's carrying rocks with it, and it's pouring into this basin down here. Think of this like a reservoir. So you can kind of see this in the video when we talk, in the Naz Daily video at the beginning of the unit where he visited Hatta Dam. It's surrounded by mountains. So water can travel down those mountains and end up collecting in the dam. And then finally, 3/4 of a cup. You can see that there's way more water. It's traveling faster. It's carrying more sediments. Okay. So you can see in the investigation, you should have written observations for each one of those things. You can take a screenshot or draw a picture of the stream table, and then there are 2 reflection questions to answer. All right, now we are at station number 2 about soil percolation. So you're gonna be observing how water gets underground into the groundwater so that companies like Masafi can pull the fresh water up out of the ground. You're gonna compare how different earth materials affect water infiltrating or entering or percolating into the earth. So you can see that we've got 4 different types of sediments here. We've got soil, sand, clay, and rocks. And we're gonna pour 100 milliliters of water in each one and then wait 5 minutes. And you're gonna record observations of what happens and how many milliliters of water that percolate through. And then once you do that, there will be 3 reflection questions. All right, so let's get started. Okay, so this will take a minute because I've gotta pour out the water. All right, so that's 100 milliliters into the soil. We can see that it's already dripping through. And then we've got 100 milliliters into the sand, and it looks like it's just kind of sitting on top. It's not percolating through. And we've got 100 milliliters into the clay, and it's a lot like the sand. No water is traveling through. All right, we got 100 milliliters. pouring it into the rocks. And look at that, it's going through pretty quickly. So we're gonna wait 5 minutes and see what happens. All right, it's been 5 minutes. And if we look at the soil, it looks like 125 milliliters have traveled through and some is still dripping through. Now we only put in 100, so there must have been some extra water stored in the soil from an earlier experiment. Here is the sand. It's only at about 25 milliliters traveled through. You can still see there's some water sitting on top. The clay has a whole bunch of water sitting on top. And in fact, it looks like no water has gone through. Maybe a little, maybe half a milliliter, right? And then here's the rocks. Some still dripping, but we've got about maybe 85 milliliters or 90 milliliters of water has traveled through. Okay, so you wanna make sure you've got some general observations and that you've recorded the milliliters of water in the table, and then answer the 3 reflection questions. Okay, activity 3 is about evaporation. You're gonna use a gizmo to observe the process of evaporation. You should have an account. If you don't, I will give you information about how to create one. But you'll log into the website and you'll go to the phase changes gizmo. You might have to scroll down to find it. They're organized by topic, and so it would be under the thermal energy topic. And in the gizmo, you change the setting to micro view and then add heat. I can show you what this would look like. So if I log in to a class, here's the phase changes one under heat transfer. I launch it. And I change it to micro view so I can see the molecules. And then I'm gonna add heat energy and I'm gonna watch and see what happens. Okay, so you can see that the temperature is going up. You can watch and see if the molecule's behavior changes. You can watch and see if anything happens to the amount of water. Right now it seems like the amount of water is staying the same, but the molecules do look like they're speeding up. But look, now that it's at 100 degrees Celsius, the amount of water is decreasing. So some of the water is evaporating or vaporizing as it boils. All right, and if you watch, we just saw a molecule escape. So you wanna write those observations, talk about what happens to the amount of water, what happens to the water molecules, and then what is the temperature where we saw the water start boiling. Then you're gonna read and highlight some important information in these 2 paragraphs and answer these 3 reflection questions. Okay, now on to investigation 4. All right, so now we're working on condensation. And as you can see in the description, condensation is when water turns from water vapor, a gas, into liquid water. So you can see an example here.
Oh, what? Oh my God, I can't see. My glasses are all fogged up. Oh, they're so wet.
Okay, so you could see that that was condensation, and some of you may have had that experience before here in Dubai when it's very humid. And so in the experiment, we filled an electric kettle, and when the water is boiling, you're gonna pour the hot water into 2 cups, into 2 beakers. And then you'll put, as you can see in the picture, another cup on top of each, including an ice cube on top of one, and we're gonna observe what happens in the upper cups, okay? Because you're gonna have some evaporation of water turning into water vapor in the lower cups, but the condensation is gonna be happening in the upper cups, and that's what we wanna pay attention to. All right, so here we are. All right, so we've got our hot water, and we can see that it's like a bit steamy. So we've got some evaporation, which you've seen, which is in another station. And now we're gonna put these other cups on top and observe what happened. And you can already see that they're getting foggy. Okay. So if we look, we can see that the sides are fogged up. We can see some water droplets appearing here. And think about it. So it's condensing because it's cooling down. It's losing heat to the air, to the atmosphere all around here. And in this case, you're losing heat to the ice cube. Okay, so you can definitely see that condensation, and you can even see some inside the beaker. And so you can see that the heat that the water vapor is losing is starting to melt the ice cube a little bit. And because it's losing heat, we can see these water droplets appearing here and all inside the container. So that is condensation. We'll see it in real life in like cold drinks outside. If the outside gets all wet, that's condensation. And we can actually see the droplets are much more apparent in this beaker with the ice on top than in this beaker, because we're losing heat more quickly because of the ice cube. Look, and if we observe a few minutes later, you can definitely see the difference between the colder environment and the warmer environment. I mean, both of these environments have less heat than the hot water does. So they're cooling down, and you're getting the water vapor is cooling down and getting condensation, but you're seeing much more condensation here in these huge droplets. So think of this like a cloud forming through the collection of water droplets as they condense from water vapor in the atmosphere. All right, so now that you're back to here, you want to record your observations of what you saw. Focus in on the condensation. What did it look like? And then you can take a photo of the experiment from the video here. And then as you can see, there's a background article to read to see an example of condensations you might see in the mornings here in Dubai. So it's about fog. And you're going to explain how this connects to condensation. And then there are 3 reflection questions. 1 about phase changes. Remember the phases of matter, the states of matter. Is it gas to liquid? Is it liquid to gas? Like, what's going on? And then what happens to the energy of the water molecules during condensation? Is the energy gained or lost? You should know this. You should be able to figure this out from our previous unit. And then I want you to think about water in the UAE. What kind of role does condensation play in moving water through the UAE?
All right, we are now on activity 5, investigation 5, which is about transpiration. So as you can see, we're going to observe how water can move through a plant. So first, an initial question that should just be background knowledge. How does water enter a plant? Why does the plant do this? So think about just like the parts or components of a plant. Which part does the plant use to take in water? Why does it do that? Okay, and then what you want to think about is what happens to water after it enters the plant. Only a few % of the water taken up through the roots is used for plants to live. Up to 99% of the water is lost. Complete the observations to see what happened. So in setting up the experiment, here's what I did. I watered the plants and I taped the bags onto the leaves or placed the plant in the bag, and I left the plant in the sun for a few hours. In fact, this year it's all just plants that are outside. So here is one of them. So I bagged this up this morning, about 6 hours ago. And so as you can see, this bag is full of condensation, but the bag did not have water in here when I bagged up the leaf. So the water must have come out of the leaves. And so what you want to do is record an observation of what do you see here inside the bag with the plant. here's another totally different type of plant. And I bagged it up and you can see the same thing. The leaves look like this in this one. And despite looking quite different, they still released a whole bunch of water into the bag. So for your observations, you want to write down, like, what do you see in the bag? Well, you see water in the bag, water droplets that must have come out of the leaves. Here is a third type of plant, and as you can see, its leaves are different too. And yet, look at this bag. Oop, too close. Same thing. So it seems like no matter what type of plant it is, the leaves will release water.
All right, so you just saw several plants who had lost water through their leaves. This is a process called transpiration. It's essentially just evaporation from a plant. All right, so you have 3 questions to answer, reflection questions to answer. There's a video. Use that video to talk about how plants move water through the UAE. Think about what type of energy is making the water evaporate from the leaves. Where does that energy come from? And then how does transpiration play a role in moving water through the UAE? And then you're going to finish this up with the final step, which is an evaluation and summary. So you want to think back to your purpose. You said at the beginning, did your investigation meet the purpose? Why or why not? And then do a summary. Write 2 to 3 sentences using specific components, processes, and interactions to explain why the water cycle is an example of a system. All right, and if you're curious, the rubric is right here. Please let me know if you have any questions.